Hi, I'm an Australian illustrator and designer, and I have recently illustrated and designed my first picture book. Today I'll be going through the whole process of working with a self-publishing author to create a picture book from start to finish. I recently worked with the author Jessica Peace to create visuals for her story, It's All For You. Jess found me on Instagram and we connected over our shared, very popular name. She was looking for an illustrator for her first book, and it was perfect timing as I was freelancing full-time and looking for more client work. On first discussions, Jess was able to describe the overall story and the visual look she wanted and how many pages. It's All For You is aimed at mothers and toddlers going through the challenges of childcare. It offers words of comfort and goes through the ups and downs. For this book, Jess wanted a calm pastel look with a nurturing whimsical feel for her aesthetic. The book was to have 10 pages of illustrations and 10 pages of text, with filler in between pages and a front and back cover. After we were both happy with the direction, she shared the manuscript with me to read. It is essential to read the script to confirm if it's something that I can see myself working on or not. I found the story to be very sweet and heartfelt and was happy to get started. To start, I made a mood board deck to share ideas of the style, layout, fonts, art mediums, and colours. I annotated my mood boards to keep it clear what I'm referencing from each image. Working on a Mac, I build this in an app called Keynote, which I find quick and easy to use. I then save it as a PDF and send it to the client. Each page is numbered and each image is numbered, so if something stands out to the client, they can simply email me back referencing the page number and the numbered image. I then open back up the deck and copy and paste their notes so I can reference them moving forward. Next is creating rough drafts. For each stage of the project, I will create a new deck to collate all my work and send it to the client for approval. To begin, I copy and paste the manuscript onto a page, section it out into sections of pages, and make notes of what could be illustrated on each page. As I read the story, ideas will pop up in my head, and writing this down allows me to record my ideas so I don't forget. I can write down multiple ideas for each page and then go back over and pick which ones work best overall. Reading the text, I understood that the visuals could be very open to interpretation for this book. The words often don't describe settings or situations, they are more thoughts, feelings, or even written as a letter from the mum to the child. My job was to take this and see what kind of visual story I could create that matched the words and flowed from one page to the next. Some pages referred to the time of day and indicated that the story flows through multiple days. This helped me initiate settings in the story such as bedtime, waking up, and showing different times of day or night that flow seamlessly through the story. Here on my brainstorming page, I've written in green my ideas for each page, and in red, I've made notes of what outfits the characters will be wearing. As we go through different times of day and multiple days in the story, the characters will change clothes to show that this is happening. Now that I've written out my ideas for each page, it's time to start drawing the rough draft. The whole process for the illustration in this book was done in Procreate, and this started with the draft artworks. I used a sketch-like brush in Procreate to create rough black and white drawings. In my deck, I've shown all the rough pages together so that you can see how they complement each other from page to page. Because the sketches are very rough at this stage, I've also made annotations in green so that the author can clearly understand what is happening in each page. On a separate page of the deck, I've also included a rough sketch of the idea for the front cover. And I have included a page with rough ideas for what the characters could be wearing. To match the different kinds of scenes in the story, I've got things like an outfit for strawberry picking, pajamas for nighttime, clothes for daycare and workwear, and weekend activity clothes. I was lucky that the feedback throughout the project was very minimal. Jess was very happy with the ideas and how I illustrated her words into pictures. There were only minor changes, which was good because the budget for the book didn't really cater for big changes. Once this stage was approved, the next step is clean drafts. Now that I've confirmed that the client is happy with the ideas of the illustrations, I'm going back over the drafts and making a clean line version of them, and then mapping out the colours that can be used in the project. I do 2 rounds of drafts because I initially start with a rough draft before I do a clean line drawing over the top. By sharing the rough draft first, I can avoid having to redo pages if they weren't happy with them in the clean draft stage. I will again provide the client with another deck. This time I put the spreads on individual pages so they can clearly see the concept and colour ideas, and then at the end of the deck I've included all the pages together so that they can get a visual representation of what the whole book could look like. At this stage, it's still quite open in terms of what medium we could use for the book for the colouring. I've gone with a pastel look, and I've indicated that I'd like to use a textured paper in the background to make it a bit more interesting. As the artwork is fairly simple, this textured background brings a little bit more out of the illustrations. Doing projects like this is a great way for me to explore different mediums, and obviously being a kids book, colour was a must. And so I got to explore this a bit more as I don't normally do this in my personal work. I had recently discovered watercolour style brushes for Procreate and pitched this idea to Jess, and she loved it. So now that the clean drafts are done, next is doing the final artwork for the picture book. To confirm Jess is really loving the concept I had come up with for the final artwork, I first completed 1 full page of the book and shared it with her, for her to look over and then reconfirm that she was happy with it. And luckily she was, so then I was able to continue on with all the other pages, knowing that we both loved the direction the book was going. For the final artwork, I wanted the background of the book to have a cream colour to it, with a textured background to help bring out the watercolour look that we were going for. This gives a more traditional feel. For this book being more on the simple side to be budget friendly, a lot of the illustrations would not be full page illustrations. There would be pages of the characters with props and objects to show what they were doing in a scene, and then a partial background that would then blend into the cream textured background. To make this a bit more interesting, on some of the pages there were watercolour borders that used colours that complemented the scene of the page and also had some elements that related back to what was going on in the story. So that might be some strawberries on the strawberry picking page, and then I've also got a border with butterflies around it on a page where the mum and child are going outside, and there are some butterflies outside. Just adding little design elements throughout the pages to make it more visually interesting. For the final artwork deck, I had presented spreads on individual pages. I've provided options for borders, but not designed them onto the final page as we are not yet at the design stage. I was essentially providing an art asset that could then be designed later once the book was at that stage. Also, throughout creating decks to present to clients, at the end of each deck, I would provide some notes that explain the visuals in written form, and also I'd make notes for next steps, what I'd need from the client to continue, and sometimes I'd include dates for when they need to get back to me by to keep on track with the timeline. Next was designing the book, and there was a bit of back and forth with this as it was our first time figuring out using self-publishing companies, and in the end the author chose to use Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. The final dimensions for the book were 8.5 by 8.5 inches to have that square look, and then they also had a 3.2mm bleed around it. When I was creating the final artwork, I was making the artwork and the background with this in mind, and then once this was definitely confirmed in the design stage, I I was able to set up final files for print. In the design stage for the book, I'm now finishing up my time using Procreate, and I have exported my Procreate files into Photoshop files and then sent them to my laptop. The rest of the design stage from now on will be done in Photoshop. I had made a template for the page size of this with the bleed and moved over my Procreate files into this new file. When I was creating the artwork in Procreate, I had recently heard that Procreate now offers a CMYK profile, which I thought was really cool because this book obviously needs to be illustrated in CMYK. And I did a little test of this, and it turns out it's not actual true CMYK, so it's still dulled down when I open the file in Photoshop in a CMYK profile. What I found worked better in this case was creating the illustration in RGB in Procreate, because both ways I still had to adjust the colors once I exported them into Photoshop. So I created the color how I wanted it to look in Procreate in RGB, as it looked better than the CMYK profile in Procreate. And then once in Photoshop, I just had to adjust the colors to match this as much as possible, which was just a case of playing with levels and color balance, and also contrast, and then sometimes duplicating layers, putting them on a multiply effect, and then also adjusting opacity. It does unfortunately take a bit of time to do this, but by choosing to do my work in Procreate, it also meant I could draw outside of home and on the go, which was a better use of my time. It was so much fun being able to draw anywhere I wanted, but then the downside was that I had to also take time to adjust the files once I had opened them up in Photoshop. There is also that pesky thing of having limited layers in Procreate, but you make it work. So in this stage, some of the main things I got to work with was figuring out fonts for the title page and the body text of the book, adding in those final borders and designing them nicely onto pages, creating a patterned double page spread for the start and end of the book, and then also designing those in between pages by taking assets that were created throughout the book, like flowers and butterflies, and then using them as spot illustrations designed onto these pages with text. For the font we chose, we wanted to use a font that complemented the themes and feelings of the story. We didn't want it to be a standard kind of text that you would see in everyday fonts. Being a kid's book, the body font that ended up being chosen was a bit more fun and a bit more quirky, but also clearly readable. The title font that was used had a bit of a sketchy kind of a look to it, which added that more tactile feel. Looking for fonts took quite a bit of time, and I was looking for free fonts that were available for commercial use. Some of the places I looked for fonts included Adobe Fonts, Da Font, and FontSpace. Because I also work as a graphic designer, I'm in a good position to also provide the designing part of the creation of a book, as well as the illustrations. When you're going to a traditional publisher, they will generally have an in-house designer that will do this part of the book, and a lot of self-publishers don't realise that this is also quite a big time-consuming job. I think doing this took several days to a week. It took a lot longer than I thought it would take, and you're working with very big files that take up a lot of space and can slow down your computer a bit. But I really enjoy this part of the process. I really like projects where I'm both creating art and also using my design skills. I think my favourite part of this stage was creating the double page spread pattern. For this I created a gingham pattern in pink with strawberries that we see in the first illustration. Once the book was designed, I organised a deck to send over to the author to confirm, and once everything was all good, to then provide print copies for the Amazon KDP. I had to provide the front and back cover on a PDF in one file, and then the inside pages on their own PDF. Each page was an individual page and not a spread, for providing them to be print ready in KDP, which meant that the bleed went all around the pages. What I love about Amazon is that the printing comes nice and quick. It didn't take too long to get our proofs sent to us. It was exciting to see the final product. Amazon provides a proofing copy with a strip over the cover and then their own barcode on the back so that you can't resell the book. It's just purposed for checking the book. I really loved how the inside page is printed. I thought the colour came out even better in print than it did on the screen, which is just a testament to all the time I spent converting the Procreate illustrations into a CMYK Photoshop version that still came out with the right colours. The only thing that was a concern, and was something I had previously heard about with Amazon KDP publishing, is that the copies we got had different colours on the front cover. So we had a copy that had this pink overtone to it in the background, and then another copy which had the correct colours with the cream background. I'm not sure why this happens, but I have heard of other self-publishing picture books having similar problems with the colours sometimes coming out different. So this was just a note that the author had to consider and try to communicate to Amazon for future printing that they wanted the cream coloured background, not the copy with the pink overtone. And then everything else was great. I would have loved to have seen a hardcover version of the book so it felt more like a proper picture book. It was still really cool to hold it in my hands and see how the book came to life. And so that's the process of creating an illustrated book for a self-publishing author from start to finish using KDP. Jess was a lovely person to work with, and she really enjoyed the work that I was creating, which made it a very nice and fun process. Doing illustration and design for books has been one of my goals, and it has been amazing to get this started. I would love to chat to anyone who is looking for an illustrator and designer for a book, and I'm open to exploring a variety of different styles. This is something that I have loved about the picture making process. Thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments. The book It's All For You is out now on Amazon, and you can find a link to purchase it in the description below.